My name is Emily Hart, and for 10 years, I lived in the shadow of the man I loved and the company we built together. It wasn't just a business, it was our dream, our baby, our home, until he chose someone else to share it with. It started in a small cafe in New York. I was a fresh graduate, holding my laptop like a shield, chasing investors for a small startup idea. He was already there. Daniel Blake, charming, confident, the kind of man who could convince anyone that the impossible was just a word. He smiled at me and said, "You have the fire, but you don't have direction. I can help you with that." That line, simple, confident, changed my life. We started meeting every day after that. Business meetings turned into late-night planning sessions, then into dinners, and before I knew it, I was falling for him. He wasn't just my partner in business. He became my best friend, my mentor, my safe place. The first year was hard. We had no money, no investors, and the world laughed at our ideas, but I didn't care. I believed in him. When he couldn't pay rent, I sold my art. When he couldn't afford flights, I skipped meals to save. We called the company Blake and Hart Innovations. Everyone told me not to put my name in it. It's bad luck to mix business with loving, they said, but I smiled and told them, it's not just love, it's partnership. And for a while, it really was. We spent nights in the office, coding, designing, arguing, laughing. He used to say, "One day we'll tell our kids how this empire started from a tiny basement." That dream kept me going through sleepless nights and missed birthdays. Then came success. Investors started calling. Articles called him a visionary. And me, I became his supportive wife. Not the co-founder, not the strategist, not the designer behind the brand, just his wife. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit as long as we were together, but slowly I began to disappear. Success changed Daniel. He started wearing expensive suits, using words like I instead of we. The man who once shared his every plan with me now locked his office door when I walked in. I remember one night, it was raining outside. I was sitting on the couch waiting for him to come home from a meeting. It was 2 a.m. when he walked in, smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't mine. "You're still awake?" he asked casually. "I was waiting," I whispered. "Emily, you don't have to wait up for me. It's not healthy." He smiled, and I said, "Not." But that smile wasn't the same. It was colder, distant. I wanted to ask, who is she? But I didn't. I still believed in us. Weeks passed. I noticed small things. Deleted texts, unexplained calls, a new assistant who dressed like a model and spoke like she owned the world. One day I walked into his office and saw them. Too close for a professional. He looked startled, then angry, as if I had done something wrong. "Tell me what it is," I asked quietly. "It's business. Don't make it personal." That word, business. The same word we built our lives around. Now he used it like a knife. I left his office that day without saying a word, but something inside me broke, quietly, invisibly. A few months later, we were invited to an investor gala. He insisted I wear red. "It's good for publicity," he said. But all night, his eyes weren't on me. They were on her, his new assistant, Samantha. The next morning, he called me into the boardroom. There were papers of legal documents. "Emily," he said, "I think it's time we take separate paths. The company's growing and you're not needed in the same capacity anymore." I froze. "Not needed?" I repeated those words like they were foreign. "Daniel, I built this with you. Every code, every design." "Yes," he interrupted, "and I'm grateful. But things have changed. I've changed." Then he slid a folder toward me. "Termination papers. It's not personal, Em. It's just business." That sentence destroyed everything I'd ever believed in. He wasn't just ending a job, he was ending us. I remember walking out of that office, everyone staring, whispering. I held my head high, but inside, I was collapsing. That day, I lost everything. My company, my love, my identity. What Daniel didn't know was that sometimes losing everything is just the beginning. After he fired me, I didn't cry that day. I walked out of the glass building that once held my dreams and I smiled. Not because I was strong, but because I didn't know what else to do. The rain hit my face as if the sky was crying for me. People passed by umbrellas, laughter, the world still spinning, and I stood there, drenched, empty, invisible. I didn't go home that night. Home didn't feel like home anymore. I rented a small apartment downtown, one room, peeling walls, and a single window that faced a brick wall. It was nothing, but it was mine. Days passed like fog. I'd wake up, stare at my phone, scroll through news about the company he now ran. There he was, Daniel Blake, in every magazine cover,
Interview, smiling with her beside the woman who replaced me, in business, and in love. One article read, "Blake and Hart Innovations expands under Daniel Blake's vision." Remember tracing my fingers over my name, Hart, as if touching a ghost. They kept the name, but erased the woman behind it.at night. I'd replay everything in my mind, the laughter, the promises, the way he once looked at me like I was his entire world, and I'd whisper to myself, where did I go wrong? But the truth was, I didn't go wrong. He did, still. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I became a shadow of myself. My hair fell, my eyes dimmed. People said, you have to move on. But how do you move on from something that lived in your bones? One morning, I received a letter from the company's HR department. Inside was a check. A severance payment, the note said. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in weeks. Not because it was funny, but because it was cruel. Held the check in my hand and said softly, this is the price of my 10 years, my love. My soul reduced to paper, then I tore it into pieces. That was the moment something shifted inside me, something that had been silent for too long. Anger. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. For the first time in months, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at a blank screen. I typed one line: Hart Technologies, founded by Emily Hart. I didn't know what it would become, I just knew I had to start again. Even if no one believed in me, I began working 16 hours a day. No investors, no team, no fancy office, just me, my laptop, and my memories. Every rejection email reminded me of Daniel's voice saying, you're not needed anymore. And every time I heard that echo, I typed faster. I turned pain into code, tears into ideas, heartbreak into strategy. 3 months later, I met someone who would change everything. Olivia Grant. A retired investor, sharp, elegant, the kind of woman who had been broken before and rebuilt herself stronger. She found me sitting alone in a small co-working space, surrounded by cold coffee cups and sleepless eyes. You remind me of someone I used to be, she said, someone who forgot how powerful she was. I tried to smile. I don't think I'm powerful anymore. Then let me remind you, Olivia said. Start by remembering who you are, not who he told you to be. Those words, who you are, stuck to me like oxygen. Olivia invested in my idea, not because of numbers or profit, but because she saw something in me that I had buried. Fire. With her mentorship, I started rebuilding. My new company wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my worth. But still, late at night, I'd see Daniel's face in my mind, the smug smile, the arrogance, and it would fuel me even more. Months turned into a year. Slowly, investors started calling again, not for Blake and Hart, but for Hart Technologies. My first product launch was small, quiet, humble, but it worked. The press wrote, a new female entrepreneur rises from the ashes. Emily Hart is back. I kept the article, not for pride, but for proof that broken things can still shine. A year later, at a tech conference in Los Angeles, I saw him again, Daniel. He was standing across the room, confident, charming, like always. Samantha was on his arm, wearing diamonds and a smile too practiced to be real. For a second, my heart skipped, not because I still loved him, but because I didn't. He noticed me, his eyes widened, shock, disbelief. He walked over. Emily, I heard you started your own company, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hart Technologies, right? You named. I smiled softly. Yes. It's doing well. I'm glad you're moving on, he said. I tilted my head. I didn't move on, Daniel. I moved up. He blinked. The arrogance cracked for just a second. Good for you, he said, before walking away. But in his eyes, I saw something I had been waiting to see for years, the fear. That night, I went home and looked in the mirror. For the first time, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Not broken, not bitter, just free. I whispered to my reflection, you're not the woman he fired. You're the woman who rose. 2 years had passed since that conference. Hart Technologies was no longer a startup. It was a revolution. Built sustainable AI systems that cut costs for small businesses. Meanwhile, Blake and Hart Innovations had started to crumble. Reports whispered about bad management, internal fights, and investors leaving. I didn't celebrate, not yet, because revenge, if rushed, loses its art. I was in my office when Olivia walked in. She placed a newspaper on my desk. They're losing their biggest client, she said. Guess who that client called next? I looked down. The name of the client glowed like a spark. The same corporation Daniel had once stolen from me. I smiled, slow and steady. Let's take the meeting. Boardroom lights. Polished table. The client executive sat across from me, curious. 7:14 p.m., October 28, 2025. Zahid Wasim. From me, curious, skeptical. Emily, one of them said, your proposal is impressive. But Blake and Hart has been our partner for years. I leaned forward. And how much has that loyalty cost you? Silence. The numbers spoke louder than my words. I didn't badmouth Daniel. I didn't need to. It just showed them results. The difference between a company run by ego and one built by empathy. When they signed the deal, I didn't smile, not because I wasn't happy, but because it wasn't about winning against him. It was about winning myself back. News spread fast. Blake and Hart loses major contract to competitor Hart Technologies. Investors panicked. Stocks fell. The same media that once worshipped Daniel now called him reckless, arrogant, unstable. He called me one night, unknown number. Late hours. I hesitated, then answered, Emily, he said, his voice tight. Congratulations. Looks like you finally got what you wanted, what I wanted. I replied softly. No, Daniel. What you gave up, you think you're better than me now. He snapped. No, I whispered. Just freer. He hung up, and for the first time since he betrayed me, I slept peacefully. Months later, fate brought us face to face again. This time, in a board meeting, Blake and Hart was on the verge of bankruptcy, their last chance of survival. Merger offer. Y Company was the buyer. When Daniel walked into that meeting room, he froze. He looked around. My team, my investors, my name on every wall. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost he once buried. Emily, he said quietly. Ms. Hart, I corrected him. You're buying us? No, I said calmly. I'm saving what's left of what I built before you destroyed it. He swallowed hard. So this is revenge? No, I said. This is closure. I slid the contract across the table. Sign it, Daniel. And walk away. The same way you made me walk away years ago. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen. He signed. After the meeting, he followed me into the hallway. His voice was quieter, softer. Emily, I made mistakes, he said. You didn't just make mistakes, Daniel. You made choices, I replied. He nodded, almost regretful. I never thought you'd rise this far. That's because you never looked down long enough to see what you were standing on, I said. He looked at me, eyes filled with something between pride and pain. You're incredible. Always was, I said, and walked away. Months later, Hart Technologies celebrated its 5th anniversary. Press cameras. Applause. Olivia on stage, smiling proudly. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. The lights were bright, but my past no longer scared me. 5 years ago, I lost everything. I began My Company, my marriage, my identity, but sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are. This company was built not on the
revenge,
reason any
but
of
on
it ever
resilience.
worked.
I'm
Not
sorry,
on bitterness,
I folded
but on
the
belief,
letter and placed
because
it in
the
a
world
drawer.
may take
Not
what you
out of
have,
hate,
but
it
peace.
can never
I
take
walked
what
to
you
the
become.
window,
The crowd
looked at the
stood.
city
Applause
lights,
thundered.
and whispered,
I smiled,
forgiven,
not
but
for
never
them,
forgotten.
but for the woman I used to be. Later that night, I returned to my office alone. A letter waited on my desk from Daniel. Emily, I lost everything trying to replace you. Turns out,